Hello, please give me your name and explain what Woodford arrangements you invested into. Thank you.
Certainly, Andy. My name is Ian Berry, and I invested into what was then called the CF Woodford Equity Income C Fund Accumulation Unit.
Thank you very much indeed. So please explain, why have you agreed to have this conversation with me, knowing it's being recorded and knowing that we're going to be putting out on social media and that kind of thing? Why do you agree to that?
I think it's important that people understand how people came to invest in Woodford and why, and the impact it's had upon them of the way that the regulatory system has treated them since it all started going down the pan.
Thank you. And who is your MP? And would you be happy for us to send a link to the recording of this to your MP?
Yes, I have no objections to that. My MP is Jonathan Lord.
Thank you very much. Please explain why you chose to invest into a Woodford fund.
Certainly. So in March 2017, I wanted to open an ISA for that current financial year. In the past, I've used an IFA called Chelsea Financial Services in London, who they sort of interact with co-funds, as it was then called. It's now part of the Egon platform. They tended to market or offer what they call easy ISAs, where you get a ready-made ISA consisting of 5 or 6 different funds. And those ISAs are badged things like cautious, aggressive, etc., balanced. So it's a ready-made way of getting an ISA without having to decide for yourself which of the different funds should comprise it. And that particular year, one of their ISAs included, as I said, 5 or 6 segments, one of which was the Woodford Fund. Ironically, this was badged the Cautious Growth ISA, which certainly wasn't what Neil Woodford was doing at the end of the day. But at the start, obviously, I was aware from press that Woodford then had a good reputation, and it seemed a good idea to open an ISA that included one of his funds.
Thanks, Ian. That's very clear. Did you use an investment platform, and if so, which one? I think you've touched on this already.
Yes. Chelsea Financial Services have links with what was then called co-funds. So it was badged as a co-funds investment ISA for the tax year 2016-17.
Thanks, Ian. And what, if anything, was your understanding of your statutory protections through the Financial Ombudsman Service and the Financial Services Compensation Scheme when you invested?
I was aware that the FSCS had a sort of limit of £85,000 for claims, and that it dealt generally with cases where basically companies have gone bust. I was also aware of FOS. I mean, at this time, I worked for the Pensions Ombudsman, which is like a sort of parallel service to the Financial Ombudsman Service. So in my work professionally, I did in some cases come across FOS, where there'd been an interaction between the two different ombudsmen and other regulators. So I knew that FOS decided cases on what they call fair and reasonable basis rather than a more legalistic one. That's probably about the most what I knew about it.
Thanks, Ian. That's interesting to know. Thank you. Didn't know that. How has the Woodford scandal impacted you?
Not too badly, in that I had only got a modest amount invested with Woodford, and I do appreciate that a lot of people have suffered significant losses. So I was able not to get too upset about it. But as time has gone on, it does seem, that something has gone wrong with the way that the unraveling of the fund has been managed by certain people. And so I thought it was something I was interested in. I joined the Lead Day Action Group, the no win, no fee basis, on the basis that it might be useful. With hindsight, it sounds like I've effectively given away 30% that I needed to have given away. But I can't get too bitter about that, because sometimes, sometimes things are a bit of a gamble, for want of a better word.
Thank you. And what do you think about the way the FCA has handled matters?
Well, for a start, I I thought the start date from which they calculated loss was somewhat later than it should have been. It seems that instead of like a big square, things have been cut down, so it's only a fairly little square, and doesn't bear much relation to the losses that Woodford investors generally have suffered since it started to go down the pan. I found some old correspondence or rather literature from Chelsea, which said that they took it off their selection list in the summer of 2018. So that was about a year after I invested with it. I see up to now that it's only really Hargreaves Lansdown who's sort of been criticised heavily for appearing to promote this particular investment. I suspect in the small print somewhere, Chelsea's literature says that these ready-made ISAs are not actually specific investment advice for me. They're just a generic view of what might be a good idea. So I wasn't that keen in the circumstances to sort of waste a lot of time trying to pursue an action against the people who actually sold me this product, because I suspect there's enough small print which means that I wouldn't get anywhere. But I do appreciate that with Hargreaves Lansdown, it appears to be a slightly different position for those people who had it on their list.
Thank you, Ian. And you may have seen in the press or elsewhere, the FCA has been making references to the phrase 77p in the pound.
Yes.
Do you have any thoughts about the FCA making reference to 77p in the pound?
Well, I mean, I think to a lot of investors that would be misleading, because it would give them the impression that they'll recover 3/4 of what they put in, and that's obviously it isn't. That certainly isn't the case, because, as I say, the start date for calculating loss was a lot later than it might have been, and there are various other sort of parameters put around it. So I don't think that was a very helpful thing to say. It may have given some people false hope, I suspect.
Thank you. Do you have a feel for what you might be getting back by if the scheme of arrangement were to be approved? In terms of pence in the pound, I don't need sort of monetary amounts, but in terms of pence in the pound, do you have a feel for what it would be through the scheme of arrangement that's been proposed, and also what it would be if you were to have a successful FOS claim?
I don't have exact figures in mind. One of the reasons was, although I'm aware of the initial distribution or two, some of the smaller later distributions were, in my case, eaten up by the ISA's management charges. So it's been difficult to actually find specific items which added together explain how much exactly I've had back so far, and therefore how much I've lost out. As I only put it, in my case, I only put in £1,000, so it's far less than most people. I've probably had back altogether probably nearly half of that, I imagine. But I understand from recent Zooms and so on that the amount that FOS could pay out if it were to find in the favour of investors would be approximately 10 times what the FCA scheme of arrangement is likely to pay out. So this is a scale of 1 to 10, I think, is the case here.
Thank you. And in general terms, any comments about the scheme of arrangements or the voting process, or indeed the vote outcome?
I'm a bit old-fashioned and like dealing with bits of paper. So when I got the voting information, I made sure that I rang up to get a paper voting form, because I find doing these sort of things online where there are a lot of pages is a real hassle. And I must say, I was pleased with the response to that. I did get a copy sent to me fairly quickly. And so I was able to lay it all out on the table and read it and make more sense of it. So, and I sent back a postal vote and got an email to acknowledge that it had been received. So that part of the process, in my case, I was happy with. I do appreciate a lot of people now like to do everything online, and it may have been less easy for some people to do that. My IFA did confirm in a letter the identity of which nominee account it was who was holding my money, so that was helpful. So they did actually give me that information, because I think there was a schedule of about 50 different platforms or providers, and you had to indicate which was yours. I was obviously disappointed in the result. I I'm aware that on Facebook and other media, there are groups which were very much vigorously opposing the scheme of arrangement. But it sounds like we were just talking to ourselves, perhaps, in view of the way the numbers have come out. One thing that surprised me was that I understand 100% of institutional investors accepted. It's very difficult to get 100% acceptance on most offers. But someone has explained that to me as simply being the case that FSCS, wouldn't be helpful for them, wouldn't be able to help them, and therefore it's a question of scheme of arrangement or nothing. And so that may well be. I don't know, how many hundreds of institutional investors there were here, but that did strike me as slightly an odd number in the result schedule that was issued. Based on what I've heard, I'm a bit surprised that there weren't more objections than there were, but maybe it's a question of a bird in the hand rather than 2 or even 10 in the bush.
Thank you very much, Ian. And the final question for you, sir, is there anything else you'd like to share? Thank you.
No, well, the only thing I'd mention is I think this does highlight the sort of fragmented nature of the regulatory system and the extent to which investors are protected. People don't necessarily know and understand how FOS and FOS and FCS interact, whether they should stick a claim into everybody or wait to see if a certain course of action happens, like the company going bust or not. And I know from my personal experience in the pensions field, this is also a problem in that field, but this is also clearly an issue here as regards, individual personal investment and so on. And there are lots and lots of bodies set up to try and deal with these things, but it's a bit of a quilt work that doesn't really knit together very well in some respects, I think. But that's my personal opinion.
Ian, that's been very helpful indeed. Thank you so much for setting aside some time for me today. I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed, Ian. Thank you.
Thank you.